right, then let me say, first of all, thank you so much for coming. This is the first webinar that our league has done, and I want to give 20 gold stars to Nancy Telford. She has put innumerable hours into learning how to do this, and as you can tell, she's on it, by golly. I also want to thank Carol Parker, who has put this together today. I personally believe that climate change is one of the most significant things that's happening in the world today, and God knows there's a lot of significant things happening right now. But this one is forever. If we don't fix it, we're in big trouble. So this is a cause that is near and dear to my heart. I want to thank both Colleen and Nita for coming and speaking to us today. And I will turn it over now to Carol Parker, who is going to be our moderator. She is also our Natural Resources Director, and she's in charge. Thank you, Carol.
Well, thank you, Anne. So I just want to welcome everyone to the webinar today on food waste and climate change. And being a League of Women Voters meeting, I want to first give a big shout out to the League of Women Voters of California, the Climate Change Task Force, and the Food, Soil, and Agriculture Subcommittee. You know, the Climate Change Task Force has some very accomplished members, and their website is a wonderful place to get some really good information on climate change. The Food, Soil, and Agriculture Subcommittee meets monthly via video conference, and I highly recommend joining. And you can look for the lwvc.org or just Google League of Women Voters Climate Change Task Force to be able to find it. Okay, so I wanted to share my screen. There we go. So today we're talking about food waste. And food waste is not a new problem, as can be seen from this poster that I first saw on a League of Women Voters San Diego presentation. This poster is from the US Food Administration in 1917. And it has really, relevant advice for today. But we are discussing food waste for different reasons. In 1917, the US was looking at food shortages due to preparing food for World War I. Today, we're talking about problems of food waste for two reasons. There are so many people that are food insecure. Since the pandemic, 1 in 6 San Diegans are thought to be food insecure. And the second reason that I'm most interested in, the second reason really is that food waste is a major contributor of greenhouse gases. So food production accounts for more than 25% of greenhouse gas emissions at the farm and all the way along the supply chain to you. The US is thought to waste upwards of close to 40% of food we produce. So that is a lot of greenhouse gas emissions for sending stuff to the landfill. So I just wanted to give you some basics. Food is natural material. It is considered organic material, and whether or not pesticides are used or not, this is not necessarily that it's only considered organic material because it's natural. And when organic material decays in the landfill, it generates methane and to a smaller extent nitrous oxide. And these gases are potent yet shorter lived greenhouse gases than CO2. And the California legislature has passed SB 1383, which addresses these potent greenhouse gases in mandating a reduction of organic material that goes to the landfill. This bill mandates a reduction of 75% of organic waste by 2025. That's compared to the 2014 levels. I'm happy and proud that our state government requires now new habits that will impact counties, cities, and our own persons to lower greenhouse gas emissions. I'm looking forward to hearing from our speakers today on how their organizations are working to save food in North County, San Diego, and help lower greenhouse gas emissions. Today we have two powerhouses in the county in the area of saving food from waste. Colleen Foster from the city of Oceanside and Nita Gilson from ProduceGood. Colleen Foster is our first presenter. She is the environmental officer from the city of Oceanside. She has multiple achievements as it relates to zero waste, food recovery, stormwater and environmental compliance, climate action, and legislative advocacy. Ms. Foster was a pioneer behind the Green Oceanside Kitchen, which hopefully we'll hear more about today. Ms. Foster is well connected in this field as she serves as president of the California Resources and Recovery Association. She is a board member of the National Product Stewardship Council and a former chairperson of the North County Food Policy Council. Please welcome Colleen Foster.
Colleen, unmute yourself.
Hi. Sorry, I'm not super fast.
Okay.
Anyways, thank you so much for having me here for this panel. I really do appreciate, and I appreciate the discussion and the opportunity to talk about, the impact food waste has on our environment and the solutions behind food recovery and some of the new laws. Let me go ahead and share my PowerPoint. Great. Can everyone see it?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So let's start slideshow format.
Mm-hmm.
And again, so my name is Colleen Foster. I'm the City of Oceanside's environmental officer. I've been with the city just under the past 15 years. I'm also a resident of Oceanside. I love North County, San Diego. I moved here from the Los Angeles area about 16 years ago. So I'm glad to be here. I have been working with the City of Oceanside to develop the city's recycling programs and eventually zero waste program. And I'm a part of our city's Green Oceanside environmental campaign and team. So let me move to the next slide. I'm working off of a different computer today, so I'm getting a little bit used to it. So food waste in California, I'll just go ahead and jump into the topic. It's a major issue. It's a major issue not only on a local level, but on a global scale. And it's actually a major opportunity to really reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And what I like about the discussion around food waste and climate action and mitigation of greenhouse gases is preventing food waste and really talking about the food landscape is something anybody and everybody can participate in. So not everyone maybe can afford to buy, a hybrid vehicle or electric vehicle. Maybe not everyone owns their home and it can add solar. When we look at other major climate action goals to, change our transportation systems and change major infrastructure, we oftentimes see a lot of barriers and a lot of cost associated with that. When talking about food waste and the things that can be done to mitigate food waste, everyone can participate, whether you're a public agency, you're a resident, you're a business, you're a nonprofit. So it's really that element of climate action that I think gets underrepresented in climate action plans, but really is a tool in which to significantly mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. So you had mentioned some great facts earlier in regards how much food waste are we really talking about. Californians throw away nearly 6 million tons of food scraps away each year. Interesting to note, that represents over 40% of what people are throwing away. Over 20% of that is edible when it hits the landfill. So that's literally like making a plate of lasagna and putting it on the plate and then just dumping the plate of lasagna. And it's really unfortunate when we're talking about 1 in 7 Americans being food insecure, meaning they don't know where their next meal comes from. In San Diego in particular, that number is 1 in 5 for students and for children. And in some areas of our region, I've actually been in different disadvantaged communities where that number for food insecurity is 1 in every 2 people. So that's the reality we're talking about. It's shameful that we're throwing perfectly good edible food away when we have food insecurity. So not only is tackling food waste and finding solutions to preventing food waste an opportunity to tackle climate change, it's really an opportunity to also tackle food insecurity. So There are several mandates, as mentioned already earlier, that are driving some of the efforts towards food waste recycling and food recovery. In particular, AB 1826, which was implemented in 2016, mandates commercial food scrap recycling for every commercial business across the state with some minor exemptions. SB 1383, which was also passed in 2016, but doesn't go into a full effect until 2022, takes it a step farther. So basically, it mandates commercial food waste recycling, as well as it mandates food scrap recycling at the residential level. So essentially, SB 1383 requires every generator across the state of California to recycle their food scraps. And what it also does, which is very exciting, is that it also sets goals and requirements to ensure that food scraps recycling is actually the last thing we do in regards to food. The law actually has language and requirements in there that basically force jurisdictions as well as generators to increase infrastructure and access to food recovery. So SB 1383 has a goal of mitigating 20% edible food from going to the landfill. And within the details of the SB 1383 law, it does require that generators of certain scale and certain size have established relationships with food pantries, feeding organizations, and essentially ensure that generators are getting food that is still edible to people, not landfills. So that's the exciting aspect of that law, is it sets significant landmark goals for recycling. It has huge opportunity to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions from mitigating food in landfills. And then it also provides opportunity and a regulatory framework around requiring infrastructure development for food recovery. And the simplest way to talk about this I'm a solid waste manager historically by nature, that's what I do. My job has now evolved. So a decade ago, when these laws come around, I might fund and talk about just funding services for recycling or landfill diversion or education and outreach. Now I'm talking about funding services and infrastructure to enhance feeding pantries, to enhance food recovery. A major portion of my new education program, as we launch our city's business commercial food scraps program, is waste prevention strategies. So I'm funding staffing and infrastructure to go towards teaching businesses or reteaching them how to avoid food waste in the first place. Because again, zero waste, and Oceanside is a zero waste city. We're dedicated to zero waste. It's all about reducing waste in the first place, using materials as much as possible, in the sense of food, feeding people, not landfills. And then ultimately, the last option for zero waste is recycling. And landfill is no longer an option. And so that's how we've, over the past several years, the past decade actually, have set up all of our programming and our infrastructure. And I'll give some examples of how we've changed the way in which we've budgeted for infrastructure and how we have prioritized infrastructure goals. So I talked about the laws a little bit, AB 1826, that's the mandatory commercial law. As a point of reference, a lot of Northern California jurisdictions have fairly robust food scrap recycling programs and organic systems. They kind of started 20 years ago in regards to these efforts. They do also have kind of some natural access to facilities. They have greater agricultural regions. It's a little bit easier to site facilities, especially if they were sited 20 years ago. So they tend to have robust organic systems. Southern California is somewhat challenged in regards to organics recycling systems. We're extremely dense. We're faced with trying to site facilities today, and we have a whole multitude of new regulations and requirements that are barriers to that. However, we're moving towards the direction. I work very closely with cities across Los Angeles, as well as San Diego, and all of our agencies have been spending the past 5 years really trying to study the infrastructure needs for these laws and solutions for infrastructure. So a lot of development behind the scenes has been happening. Maybe in your local community, you don't see food scrap recycling at a business yet. It is coming. It's essentially mandated by 2022. There are mandates in place for it to happen now, but they don't have necessarily the financial stick that SB 1383 has. So if your city or a business that you visit often does not have food scrap recycling yet, you will see that level of service over the next 2 years. And that's the difference between the two laws. Is AB 1826 says thou shalt do it, businesses shall recycle, but we won't fine you. SB 1383 not only requires every generator to recycle their food scraps, but also has a long list of different enforcement actions that jurisdictions are going to have to develop and take over the next 2 to 4 years. So some of the differences, the ultimate goal of it is to obviously reduce organics to landfill, which ultimately will help the governor in the state's efforts to meet its emission reduction targets. The state of California will have extreme difficulty in meeting its emission reduction targets if they don't continue down the pathway of removing organics from landfills. To geek out a little bit on climate action and greenhouse gas emissions, when you look at climate action plans, oftentimes when you're looking at the chart of how emissions contribute to climate change and then what action should be taken, oftentimes solid waste just gets a little sliver of the pie, around 3%. So essentially the way a lot of the studies have been done, they're only quantifying the emission reductions from the actual landfill emissions. But the interesting thing, the real quantification of emissions from zero waste programs takes into consideration, you know, avoiding waste in the first place, not producing materials, making sure materials are getting utilized over and over again, and then also ultimately avoiding transporting materials to landfills. So a lot more greenhouse gas emission reductions can be attributed towards zero waste and obviously food waste recycling than actually what a lot of plans and studies demonstrate. So that's always a little bit of myth I like to debunk, that solid waste should not be the least thing we should be thinking about. It should be really at the forefront, because solid waste management is what we historically called it. What we call it today is resource management, materials management, or zero waste. And essentially by managing our resources efficiently, we're reducing consumption from a virgin raw material perspective. We're reducing the aspect of emissions from manufacturing, distribution, consumption. And all of those emissions are beyond what's quantified in disposal. So just kind of an interesting fact I think it's important to know. So I was mentioning earlier, how do we reduce the amount of material sent to landfill, and how do we go zero waste? The way the city of Oceanside has developed our zero waste programs and goals is we focus on source reduction first. Again, that's about waste prevention. From a food perspective, simple ways to do that is reducing surplus food by efficiently buying and storing food. So whether I'm working with a commercial generator or a residential household, a lot of our education programs are focused on how that commercial generator is procuring food. You know, can they procure on a daily basis? How do they store that food? Is there infrastructure that can help them prolong the life of that food? And then are they monitoring really the food that's going out? How much is getting wasted? So really working with a business to fine tune the way they process their food. Every chef you talk to, when you first talk to them, will say, I have no food waste, because that seems like a failure, right? But I've spent many years in dumpsters. Everyone has food waste and everyone has areas of improvement. So it is a great opportunity. Simply take a look at your dumpster and find out how you can prevent what's in that dumpster in the first place. And that's really what source reduction is about. We also do a lot of programming for residents where, you know, we try to do education and outreach. We have a zero waste brunch coming up in a couple of weeks that I'll talk to you about. But we do a lot of education with the residential community to help them understand how to properly store food, how to buy food to mitigate waste. And then we also have done a lot of education outreach in regards to the truth behind Best Buy and expiration dates, because there's not a lot of truth behind it. So some great opportunities to prevent waste in the first place. And then our next goal is to feed hungry people. I want to feed people, not landfills. And that is something that we need to see happening moving forward. So whether you live in the city of Oceanside or you live in another agency or other community, please encourage that those agencies are not just funding systems for recycling or landfilling, but are funding programs for waste prevention, for food recovery, and helping to support food pantries. So we're feeding people and not landfills. And then the other aspect of zero waste is feeding animals. That comes before recycling. So a lot of great opportunity there to work with our local agricultural community. And then the last option, I like to actually eliminate landfilling. So I think it's an edit I need to put on this slide. The last option is recycling, composting, renewable energy generation. All of those are different processes in which we can recycle food waste. So we can either recycle it into soil amendments, we can recycle it into energy. There are a multitude of different infrastructure systems across California. The City of Oceanside, our food scraps recycling program, which we're launching this year, the food scraps collected from all commercial businesses will go to Waste Management's core facility. At that facility, basically it gets processed into a bioslurry that then gets injected into currently the Los Angeles Sanitation wastewater facility, and that turns into energy. So it's a water reclamation system in which we can take that bioenergy and basically anaerobically digest it with our wastewater treatment system. So it helps power the way in which we process wastewater. So that's just one way to do it. There are other ways to also process food, such as composting, which I know the city of San Diego does that, and several other communities. We also have composting in Oceanside, but that composting is focused on yard scraps, and that's at El Corzon Compost Facility operated by Agri-Service. So this is our zero waste framework and our system you see on this slide. To get a little bit into the details of that, food donation is a huge aspect of what we've been trying to prioritize our programs for. Again, it is a shame that over 20% of what ends up in the landfill is perfectly edible. I have gone to landfills where I've been there when a load has come in from a local grocer, and I've watched them dump the load into the landfill, and I've been able to walk up to that pile and pick up perfectly good and beautiful produce. And this is not produce you'd see at some market that's lower end or anything. This is produce you'd see at high-end market. Perfectly beautiful and good produce. But that produce is being disposed of simply because there's this expectation at these nice markets that all the oranges must be in a perfect triangle. And people only pick from the top. So by the time they get to those lower levels, the oranges may be a little bruised or not look so perfect. And so those oranges are getting cycled out and disposed of. So these are things we need to change, we need to avoid. And in order to do that, I think it's really important that all of our agencies and our stakeholders encourage that programs get developed to support food recovery and support food donation. So with that mindset, over the past 5 years, as the city's developed its organics infrastructure for food scrap recycling, we've also invested heavily into understanding barriers towards food donation and food recovery, and into fostering solutions for that. And I'll talk about the Green Oceanside Kitchen in just a few moments, but basically we've been kind of identifying the issues. And a lot of the issues towards enhanced food donation and food recovery is simply, lack of access to infrastructure, lack of access to coolers, lack of access to staffing and resources. A lot of commercial generators feel like, hey, if I'm going to donate food to you, you should take it for free. But there's a cost to pick up that food. There's a cost to get that food to a food pantry. Does that food pantry even have access to a large-scale fridge to be able to hold it long enough to distribute it? And these are all barriers that we've begun to identify over the past several years. Again, I used to be a recycling specialist. These days, I'm attending food policy council meetings. I'm working heavily with feeding groups to kind of understand how I can help serve them. So instead of buying a recycling container, I'm working to fund coolers to go into local food pantries so they can take in more fresh, healthy product and get it out to people in need. And ultimately, that's helping grocers that have been dumping food product because the food pantries can't take it all. And then now they have an opportunity to work with food pantries that have expanded access to hold more food. So we've been doing a lot of work with that and a lot of education. There's a ton of misinformation out there about best by dates, expiration dates, And we've been really working with our local school district as well as businesses to educate them on, hey, this food is good. At the very least, if you can't process it in your system, this food does need to go to your local food banks, and it's perfectly edible. Like Best Buy means nothing. Those dates aren't regulated. The only food labeling dates regulated by the FDA are for baby formula. Everything else is just self-generated by manufacturers. So basically a manufacturer puts a date on a yogurt. That's because they want you to buy more yogurt. And essentially that yogurt, that Best Buy date, that's just at its peak freshness. That doesn't mean that yogurt's bad. Oftentimes yogurt will last anywhere from 30 days to 2 months after some of its Best Buy dates. So we do a lot of education to clarify that you don't need to throw the food out. You know, at the end of the day, take the sniff test. So just an overview on some of the stuff we're doing with food recovery and education. Again, all of that, we do that prior to food scraps recycling. The City of Oceanside this year has launched a mandatory commercial food scraps recycling program. We were ready to deliver food scrap recycling containers to all 3,000 businesses in Oceanside on March 16th. COVID hit on March 16th and everything was shut down. So we have redeveloped the program. We've turned it into a fully virtual training program, and we'll begin delivering of food scrap containers to all businesses in Oceanside starting in August. And we're really excited to see this program get launched. It's compliant with all of the existing laws. It's gonna increase our diversion rates by over 10% within 1 year. So this is really how you get to those higher levels of diversion of 75% to 90%. Community programming, no program, no system will be successful without the buy-in of all our community, whether it's visitors, residents, businesses. So it's very important that we support those relationships. We've spent the past decade working closely with the school district on their zero waste programming. Oceanside Unified School District became the first school district in the nation to adopt zero waste as a goal. They did that following the city's adoption of zero waste as a goal. They've done phenomenal work to take schools from a 10% recycling rate to over a 70% recycling rate. Right now we're working with OUSD to implement a refit grant. We applied on behalf of OUSD. They just won the grant. It's $50,000. This grant is going to go towards the purchase of coolers from the back end perspective. So the kitchens have more access to cooler capacity so they can increase meal production, take in food that may have otherwise go to waste, prolong the life of that food. And then we're also going to buy front end coolers that will go to enhance school food pantries. So students have access to healthier food, not just packaged snacks at pantries, etc. We're also launching a residential backyard composting program this July, where basically residents can get either a free static or vermicompost bin and start composting in their backyard. So these are all elements to work with our local community to reduce food waste. One of my favorite projects, my heart and soul, I put this in the past 5 years, is the City of Oceanside's Green Oceanside Kitchen. Again, with that mindset a decade ago, as we developed our zero waste plan, waste prevention, feeding people, not landfills, was our priority. So, you know, you have to put your money where your mouth is, basically. And so we basically, the City of Oceanside, I give a lot of credit to our city council. They've made some amazing decisions over the years and some challenging ones. The city 5 years ago decided to support the development of the Green Oceanside Kitchen. It's a one-of-a-kind project. It's the first of its kind, and now is becoming a model across the nation. Essentially, the goals of the Green Oceanside Kitchen was to be able to facilitate large-scale food recovery and to facilitate culinary arts training based on sustainability, as well as facilitate job training and development, especially for youth, veterans, you know, at-risk populations, as well as our senior community. So 5 years ago, we began the development of the project. We cited the project at our city's senior center. We thought it was a great opportunity to work with our senior community and our community overall to provide education and access to food for the food insecure. Since that time, we have built a over 2,000 square foot commercial kitchen. This commercial kitchen is not like normal commercial kitchens. The equipment, as well as the cooler, has been carefully designed and selected to be able to do large scale processing of food. So what we found when I first started doing research with a lot of food pantries is you'll have an amazing food pantry and they're picking up from a local grocery store, but that food pantry only has a cooler the size of a closet. But in order to get their pickup of food each week, they have to take whatever the grocer wants to give them. So a lot of times I found out there was such a thing called donation dumping. So in order to take all the bread and the fruit and the food, they had to take 2,000 gallons of milk that week because the store had to offload it. And they were essentially dumping that food product. So this kitchen has been designed with a cooler the size of a semi-truck in order to provide a cooler in the region to be able to take large amounts of food. When COVID hit, all the restaurants closed, the school district, closed operations, hundreds of pounds of food, all of a sudden became available and couldn't be utilized in operations. However, there was very little infrastructure in place anywhere across the county to be able to take this food and then process it into meals. So the Green Oceanside Kitchen, with a large commercial facility with a cooler the size of a semi-truck, we were able to, through our operator, the Oceanside Kitchen Collaborative, they were able to take, several hundreds of pounds of food. Actually, I think it's over several thousand pounds of food. They've been able to take that donated food from generators that would have otherwise wasted it because they were closed down. And they've been able to process over 100,000 meals in the past 3 months alone for the food insecure. So that's been exciting. OKC would not have been able to do that. The city would not have been able to facilitate that COVID feeding contract if we had not had this large scale commercial kitchen in place. So the kitchen opened up a year ago. It's been exciting to see it really become an asset in light of COVID. And it's exciting to see how we can utilize the kitchen moving forward for training. So the kitchen not only includes a large scale commercial kitchen with large processing equipment, it also includes a separate kitchen that used to be an old staff kitchen that was really underutilized. We upcycled it, decorated it, and we turned it kind of into a Martha Stewart style demonstration kitchen. We set up AV equipment so we can hold cooking classes for our local residents and our local community. So we are launching some virtual cooking classes over the next several months. Our first virtual class is on June 28th. I hope you guys can attend it. It's a Sunday brunch and a crunch. Components of that class will be from the demonstration kitchen, and then some of the components of the class will be from my own home, because we really want to engage people in our community, and they can do these things at home as well. So the Green Oceanside Kitchen fosters large-scale processing, fosters feeding people, not landfills, and then it's also fostering that sustainability training. And actually, that ends my presentation. I wanted to keep it brief as much as possible. There are so many wonderful things going on. I've been inspired by many people across our region, and it's exciting to be able to work with a city that has really, taken a step forward to tackle climate action, food insecurity, as well as zero waste. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Colleen. I learned a lot from your presentation. I hopefully will have a few minutes to have some questions and answers at the very end of the presentation. If any of the attendees have any questions, if you could click on the Q&A button at the bottom and input your questions there. Okay, thank you. So now we have our second presenter. We have Nita Kurmins Gilson. She is the co-founder and executive director of Programs and Outreach for ProduceGood, an organization that gleans produce and delivers it to food distribution groups. This is where I met Nita several years ago, as my husband volunteers for ProduceGood most Sundays at the Leucadia Farmers Market. Nita co-started this organization from a gathering of friends in Carlsbad to almost 2,000 volunteers today. ProduceGood has won several awards for their work in food saving, including the EPA Food Recovery Challenge National Award winner, top national data-driven organization. Nita has been specifically recognized with several awards, including from Congressman Mike Levin as an environmental hero. So please welcome Nita.
Hi, everybody. So good to see you, or to see your names. I wish I could see all of you. It's always a little bit strange, this whole new Zoom world, but I'm going to share my screen and get going with my, hold on. 1 second. Oh, shoot. Hold on. Okay, here we go. Oh, shoot. Hold on. I need to do one more thing. I'm sorry. Okay, let me try that one more time. Share screen. There we go. Okay, now I've got the sound and the pictures. All righty. So we are a food recovery group called ProduceGood. And I do have, because I'm the person who does all of the branding and the marketing, this does have a lot of imagery, and we do have some videos. I do love videos. I think they convey a lot. So hopefully you will be able to get a really good idea of our operations from the various methods of presentation. No. So here are some facts. Oops. Sorry. All right. We were a grassroots organization that was started, something that I did in Carlsbad as a side grassroots sort of endeavor for a few years from 2010 to 2014. And then I was introduced to Geraldine and Alexandra White, who are my partners, and we banded together. They took the vision of food recovery from just this grassroots level and helped make it become what it is today by having our 501c3 federal nonprofit, all of that submitted so that we were able to actually utilize all the resources that you get when you become a nonprofit. We basically, some of the information on here is a little bit old. So for example, we've been rescuing much more than 4,000 pounds a week. We do have about 1,200 active volunteers. We have 2,000 in our database, but 1,200 active. We have about 150 backyard farmers and growers. We have 2 programs, which I will talk to you about in just a moment. We have 1 community engagement program, and we have about 35 networked receiving agencies, 3 paid staff, and 1 full-time volunteer. So here is what the basis of all of our work is: gleaning, and it is an old tradition that we're bringing into the 21st century. So this, I think actions speak louder than words. This is an event that we did with Rancho Valencia Resort, who happens to have a beautiful lemon grove on the property. And it will give you a really good idea of what a gleaning event looks like, although they're not always this fancy, but here we go. Welcome. We are a food recovery group called ProduceGood. We do a lot of upcycling and food recovery of citrus throughout the county. We had no idea what to expect. This is our very first time doing Gleaning Day with Rancho Valencia, and we thought maybe there'd only be 4 people, but lo and behold, just thrilled that you are here. You guys are doing an amazing thing today. We are going to be collecting this fruit, and then we are keeping it out of the landfill, considering that we also have 1 in 6 people who is food insecure. We are also helping to feed our hungry neighbors. We have a lot of bounty, especially in San Diego. We have so much beautiful fruit and such a long growing season.
of about 900 volunteers who help us each Saturday picking citrus, and then that gets taken to the food bank typically. So we are literally solving both problems in one sweet step, as we say. Our mission is to be reducing waste and hunger while building community.
So that's a lovely introduction to what we do. We pick citrus, mainly citrus, all over North County for about 7.5 months a year, starting in December, ending sometime in July. We follow the citrus. That's when it is at its peak. And as any of you who have even one citrus tree know, they're very prolific. So we are harvesting a very small percentage of what is out there, but it grows every year, and I'll explain a little more about how we've pivoted during the pandemic to even be able to capture more fruit, which is very exciting for us. So some of the benefits, obviously, are that we are keeping this beautiful edible fruit from the landfill. As we all know, there's so much citrus in this kind of quasi-agricultural area of North County. We help the tree owners who don't like the waste. They hate the waste. They call us all the time and say, I've got these 10 grapefruit trees and the fruit's falling and I can't stand it. So this is one of the reasons why we exist, because there are so many people who do not want to see the waste and they want a way to be able to share it. So we obviously are now feeding people with this delicious and absolutely fresh, straight from the tree fruit. And we are always raising awareness. The statistics that Colleen already mentioned, which we mention all the time, 40% of all food is wasted in the US. And 1 in 7, this was old statistics, it is now 1 in 6 people are food insecure, and that goes down to 1 in 5 children who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Creating the culture of self-reliance, I'll talk a little more about that later, but we are really focused on locally grown, locally collected, and locally used food. And so this is a wonderful way. I'm so happy that Colleen and I are together on this today, because Oceanside has been just the leader in the county for zero waste. And we were so fortunate to be able to team up with them for several years now. And we have had many opportunities to be able to, not only they support our mission, but we're also able to support theirs. And we, for the last 2 years, unfortunately this year we were not able to do it, but the last 2 years we've been able to do a community event called a GleanUp. And this is a wonderful video that will give you a great idea of what happens when you get a whole community doing what gleaning was. You just saw in the previous video. So here we go. That we can also share with our neighbors. So thank you all. Let's give yourself a big hand. So this is what can be done with the community portion. So our mission is to reduce hunger and waste while building community. And this is where we really shine. Our community engagement is incredible. And we have realized during COVID that where many other food supply chains were broken, we actually were thriving because we work with communities to source local produce to feed that same community. And this is what we call a crop circle. So in other words, rather than we go out to Escondido and we pick a bunch of fruit, we no longer are working with a food bank to have them cart that down all the way down to their, Mira Mesa, and then have all of that go back up again, distributed all over, so that it's not staying in the community where it was grown. So we have realized that this is the most powerful decentralized model that we could possibly do, and that's what we've been working on. We also contract now with cities, and Oceanside was our first contract. So thank you again, Oceanside, for doing the work that we're already doing. So we are contracted to do gleaning events. We do X amount for each city that we've contracted with, and that helps them with their diversion rates. As Colleen mentioned, all the cities are now under pressure to comply with the state laws, and many of them have no idea how to do it. And we've been doing this for 10 years now, so we understand what that means. And every time that we are picking fruit, we are keeping it out of the landfill. And we have now a grand total, lifetime total of 650,000 pounds that we have harvested, which equals almost 2 million servings, which equals 260 tons diverted from the landfill. So it's a pretty impressive number for a tiny organization like ours. We're small but mighty, that's what we say. Here is our Farmers Market Produce Rescue Program, which is called Market Share. So this is our second program. Our first program is Crop Swap, and that is our backyard and orchard gleaning. Our Farmers Market Produce Rescue is farmers markets. We collect what they cannot sell, and we are, when times are normal, we are normally able to collect from the 4 markets that we work at, Hillcrest, La Jolla, Solana Beach, and Leucadia, about 2,000 pounds a week averaged. Right now things have changed quite a bit. We're only in Leucadia, and actually Van Parker is leading the charge there. He's been a one-man show, which has been incredible for us to be able to start working again at that market. I may skip over this next video because it looks like time-wise, and Carol, maybe you can correct me, but we have 5 minutes, is that right? Or do we have a little more time?
It'd be good if you could
Yep.
finish up a little quicker, but we can go over a bit.
Okay, all right. Well, so basically the farmer's market is, as you can see, it's this beautiful, beautiful produce that would otherwise be thrown out. We've now talked to these farmers. We know them. We've been doing this for 3 years. Many of them they've had no other outlet except for what we're doing to be able to donate their produce that day. And we do these markets on Sundays, and the reason is because that is their last day of market. They cannot, usually they don't have another market for 3 or 4 days, and they won't bring it back. It's just not, it might be great for 2 days, but it's not going to be great for 4. So we're able to capture all of this wonderful stuff that they are, probably going to toss. Some of them do feed their animals, some compost, but anecdotally we know that they do not, as a whole, they're just dumping it. So both the farmers and our growers receive tax donation receipts at the end of the year for all the pounds of produce that they've donated. So this is a win-win. So they are getting tax donation credit, and they are also helping to keep things out of the landfill and feed people. I'm going to skip this really cute video. I'm sorry, it's a little bit long, and now I realize we don't have much time, but this is basically how we do our farmers market program. It's been a very, very big success, and we hope to open more markets when we can. Again, the same thing that we're doing in our other program. We just basically are helping farmers share their bounty. We are raising awareness about food waste and food insecurity. And we're providing a human, an outlet for farmers. Again, they've never had anything like this. So it's been really a wonderful thing for everybody. We are this is just a quick slide about, we just are in the community. We have many events. We do a lot of, we do workshops, we do presentations. We are on many different groups and organizations that have to do with food waste and food insecurity. So the things that set us apart from other, let's say, I guess food recovery groups, is that we're sourcing the fresh excess. We're basically taking it from the source, keeping it from falling on the ground and going into the landfill. And we are providing direct access. So this is point-to-point direct benefit and increased self-sufficiency for the communities themselves. And we are trying to raise awareness and promote systemic change, as we have seen, especially during COVID, the breakdown of the supply chain. It's the industrial model is not the best model. And so one of the things that we've now seen is this model of decentralized community-based food recovery is very powerful, and it can work anywhere. And here's, I won't read this whole thing, but we basically had an amazing epiphany during COVID, whereas most organizations, including the food banks, basically were completely overwhelmed. They couldn't move forward. They had too much, then they had too little. They were stuck in a way that, because they're a repository, they could not get the food out to people quick enough. We are, on the other hand, we don't store anything, we don't keep anything, we're the movers. We keep it moving from the source to the need. And we have these 3 great little vehicles. We call them the fruit loopers. You probably saw the vans in the videos. Those are moving that fruit from where we get it to those who need it. And that, as Colleen mentioned as well, is one of the biggest problems. We do not have a hunger problem. The problem is an access problem. The problem is a transportation problem. And that's where ProduceGood really shines. We're able to pivot quickly, get it to those in need, and get it to many places. So during COVID, we actually increased our receiving agencies from 13 to 35. We added 15 more agencies in 2 months, because there was so much need, and because we're able to be quick, do small picks. We work with the small crews now, but we're working twice as many events and twice as long. So it has been an incredible growth period for us. And as I said, we have been working and producing twice the amount that we ever have. 8,000 pounds a week has been our average. That is double anything we've ever done before. So it's been an amazing way to highlight just how effective this model can be. So we now are working every day, almost 2 events a day, and getting food immediately to so many different agencies and so many different places. It's been pretty incredible, considering we only have 3 staff members. And that's pretty much all I can tell you now. There's a lot more to say, but I will say this. I think that the fact that you as a group have really wanted to find out more about food waste and to understand how important this is environmentally, and how we as a community, particularly in North County, are working towards this. I applaud you, and I really thank you for the opportunity to be able to share what we've done at ProduceGood. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Nita. That was a very inspiring presentation. So if Colleen could come back to her video, and maybe we can answer some questions here. And first of all, I was just hoping that Colleen may take, like a minute or less to talk about anything that she has to say about ProduceGood. And if Nita could say anything about Colleen, that would be great.
Well, I actually, when she was talking, I wanted to let everyone know, to give a perspective of cost. And I'm an environmental person, I'm a people person, but at the end of the day, I have to be about numbers, like what can my program afford to do and not do. And the ProduceGood program and model and their organization, I don't know how to put this bluntly, but they're one of the lowest cost programs for my program that give me the highest return. So I think one of the questions in the queue is, what are other cities doing? Are they doing this as well? If they're not, you better ask those cities to do it, because this is really, this type of, decentralized model, really facilitating getting the food from our backyards to the people in need in our local communities. That's the cheapest way that we can manage our resources. So, to give perspective, our Oceanside recycling and disposal systems, that is approximately a $20 to $25 million a year program that I oversee. Nita's contract ProduceGood is in the low thousands. And so that's perspective. When people ask me, well, why did the city spend so much on the Green Oceanside Kitchen? And they ask me how much it costs. The Green Oceanside Kitchen, that facility, is a $1.7 million one-time investment. But again, we spend over $20 million a year, my one city alone, to deal with disposal of materials. So I really encourage you to think about the perspective that waste prevention, food recovery, those are your lowest cost options to see true sustainability and zero waste. They also have the highest level of job opportunities as compared to landfilling. And at the end of the day, landfilling, wasting resources, those are the most costly things we could be doing. So I really encourage you to engage your cities and your agencies to support these type of creative programs. Because a lot of times when these cities go to meet someone like Nita or ProduceGood, well, why am I going to focus on backyards? Why am I going to fund a food recovery program? I'm just about recycling. Well, Nita's programs, food recovery, that's a lot more effective than recycling and disposal at the end of the day. So I think that probably sums up my perception of ProduceGood.
Thank you.
Well,
And
thank you, Colleen. Should I go now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, we love you, Colleen. We love Oceanside, and for so many reasons, but not the least of which is that you are one of the few who have the actual vision and the numbers. So thank you for saying that. We have a very good ROI, and people, it's astonishing what we have done with the little that we have. And the reason that we can do that, in addition to having my amazing partners, is that the community engine that runs this is as excited and as an enthusiastic engine as you could possibly imagine. So to be able to tap into people who want to help, who can see the results. I mean, literally, you can see the fruits of your labor. When you are doing stuff with us, you are picking fruit, and there it is. There's the big giant box of fruit that you have just finished picking. And to add to this amazing relationship with Oceanside, when the kitchen was finished, we had already been in discussions with Cal Recycle, which is the California emission, I always forget what it actually is called, the emission control board, is that right?
Integrated Waste Management Board.
Okay, thank you. We just call it Cal Recycle. They were extremely interested in the fact that we wanted to partner with Oceanside and Oceanside Green Kitchen to do a grant wherein ProduceGood was administering these programs, these gleaning events, and we were using Urban Core, which we didn't mention at all, and I don't want to go into too much, but it's a really cool it's a work program, workforce program. And we were able to then use their labor, and then we were able to deliver all of this. And in fact, I think we did 70,000 pounds to Oceanside Kitchen Collaborative, to the Oceanside Green Kitchen. We just finished June 15th, our contract for the grant. That is astonishing. That is 70, so they were getting at least about 1,500 pounds a week for 30 weeks from us, and they were making things immediately in the kitchen or processing things, and it was working exactly as it should. So together, we're like the dream team. It's like the model that the other cities should be doing. I mean, maybe they can't all have these kitchens, but they can certainly understand that this is how it's going to work. This is how we can actually truly affect change, recover the food, keep it out of the landfill, and feed people. So, yay.
Okay, I have some questions here, and I'm going to sort of try to reword them a little bit so to speed things along here. Well, I have a couple of questions for you, Nita. How do people go about letting you know that they have food in their backyard for you to pick? And do you take other food other than citrus?
Great question. So yes, so we are now pretty systematized, which is very exciting. Any person, anyone here, or anyone that you know that has a fruit tree, it can be any kind of fruit. We typically are not doing gleaning, farming gleaning of the ground in people's gardens, but it is any kind of fruit. We will take all kinds. I will say loquats are sort of iffy. It really depends on the situation, but overall, all fruits. If you go to ProduceGood.org, that's ProduceGood.org, there is a button that says growers. You click on that, you fill out a short form, and then we will contact you within 48 hours and see if we can schedule something with you.
And then a follow-up question is, is there really enough people to eat all the citrus that you provide?
So great question. Also, this kind of ties into the processing part. So, you know, people always ask, well, how many lemons? Who's eating those lemons? Like, what's going on with the lemons? Because we get a lot of lemons. But people do eat the lemons. We talk to all of our agencies. Every one of them says, yes, people love them. They use them for all manner of things. But to answer the question in a larger sense, there is a threshold. I mean, you can only eat so many oranges, right? I mean, there's only so many that can be eaten, but they can be made into a whole lot of other things. And that's where the processing kitchen comes into play. So anything that can be processed into something else is what we would love to take, because we would love to be able to rescue that and you know, use that in a way that can be, you know, have a better sort of blanketed, you know, application for everyone to be able to enjoy.
And that's a big motto and goal of the Green Oceanside Kitchen, as well as the Oceanside Kitchen Collaborative, is we've never wanted to compete against food directly going to food pantries. The facility's goal, as well as OKC, our operator, is to take food that maybe the pantries can't process or can't take, and take that food and process it into beautiful meals, whether it's for the food insecure or whether they utilize it within their own catering operations, etc. So again, you know, you can't take a semi-bruised tomatoes to a food pantry, but can you take it to our kitchen and they make it into beautiful sauces? Yes. Can OKC do something wonderful with lemons? Yes. And so that's really where you need all of these aspects to have a truly sustainable food system.
Wonderful. So Colleen, there's a couple that there's lots of recognitions of the great work you've been doing. I have a question here that wondering if the OKC Meals Feeding Oceanside Seniors and Families, is that really ending on June 28th?
So I'm not entirely sure of the exact date. I don't oversee that particular contract, but the city of Oceanside did, I mean, it was amazing, phenomenal of our city council, but almost immediately when COVID hit, the city council met and they funded just under $500,000 to pay OKC to produce those meals. And OKC did a phenomenal job in being able to connect with local sources and work with ProduceGood and other entities to take in food to produce even more than what we were paying for, essentially. So that fund is up. You know, that fund was utilized. 100,000 meals went out to the community all across North County. It didn't just go to Oceanside residents. At this point, that funding is up. We don't necessarily have another funding source of that nature, but I know OKC is doing some phenomenal work to partner with other entities to be able to provide additional food access. But again, there are a lot of robust feeding programs still out of existing pantries that are able to kind of pick up from there and support food insecurity moving forward. So a lot is still happening. Even though that contract may be ending, there are other resources across the county and in Oceanside.
And now it's 2:11, and so I'm afraid I think we need to stop the questions and answers. And I just want to thank both of you. This has been wonderful. as our first webinar. We got some really fantastic information, and we are going to put this up on our website so that everyone can link to it later. We'll send out a link. And as it's our first webinar, I want to, thank Nancy Telford for being our Zoom guru. This was a big learning experience for all of us, and but Nancy got us through, so that's been wonderful. But I would just very much like to thank Nita and Colleen Foster again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carol, so much.
Thank you.
Anyone email me or call me anytime if you'd like to talk more. So thank you.
Me too. Same here. I think you have our information, right? I mean, I know you've got our website. So, but yeah, if you need anything else, you want to add that to your list, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, and this ends our webinar. Thank you very much.